I'm Maisie Marsh, and the first thing I want you to know is that the wine glass missed my head by 6 inches. Not thrown at me, thrown near me. Holly had always understood that distinction, how to make something feel like a threat without technically being one. 29 years of practice will do that. The red wine ran down my kitchen wall in a slow, dark streak, and I stood there watching it, thinking about how long it was going to take to scrub out of the grout. That's what I was thinking. Not run, not call someone, just the grout. Nobody tells you that the moments that change your life arrive while you're thinking the wrong thoughts entirely. 4 hours earlier, I was ironing napkins, my grandmother Ruth's napkins, white cotton, blue border she'd embroidered herself, folded in a cedar drawer since 1987. I ironed every single one, set them under the forks, smoothed the corners down. I don't know what I was hoping for, that the right table setting would somehow make my family into different people, that if the napkins were pressed and the pot roast was slow cooked and the apartment was clean enough, something would shift. It didn't shift. It never shifts. Holly arrived late, walked in without knocking. She'd had a key for 8 months, a temporary thing that had quietly stopped being temporary. She looked around my apartment the way a landlord checks a property before raising rent, and said, "You still have that couch?" Behind her, my dad walked in and gave me the nod, the one he reserved for acquaintances and toll booth attendants. My mom pressed a box of store-bought cookies into my hands, leaned close, and whispered, "She's fragile tonight, Maisie. Just let things go." Holly's fragility, the one thing in our family that never went unfunded. I put the cookies on the counter and went back to stirring the pot roast. Dinner started, and Holly talked for 11 uninterrupted minutes about her wellness brand. 3 years of launching, 0 years of landing. Dad nodded through all of it. Mom asked follow-up questions. I passed the bread basket twice, refilled my own water glass. Nobody mentioned the pot roast. Then Mom set down her fork. "The Birchwood house," she said, light, casual, like she was mentioning the weather. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. "What about it?" Holly's been calling me for 3 months. I've been very clear each time." Holly tilted her head, that specific tilt, the one that means she's decided how far she's willing to go tonight. "You love that, being the accurate one, the responsible one, the one who followed all the rules. Holly, what, Holly? While I what, Maisie? Go ahead, say it." She picked up her wine glass. For 1 second, I thought she was leaving, that she was taking her glass and her grievances and walking out the door, and the night would end badly but survivably. Then she turned and she threw it. The glass hit the wall 6 inches from my head, exploded. Wine spread across the white paint like a wound. A shard skidded across the floor and stopped near my foot. Nobody moved. Mom's hands were folded in her lap. Dad was looking at the table. The silence in that apartment was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life, louder than the glass breaking, louder than my own heartbeat. Then Holly pointed at me, finger extended, voice completely, terrifyingly level. "Sign the house over, or I will make your life very small." She picked up her bag. She walked out. The door didn't slam. Somehow that was worse. So much worse. It just clicked shut, softly, like a period at the end of a sentence that had already been decided. And my parents stayed seated. Mom reached over and straightened her fork. Dad asked if there was more bread. I stood in my kitchen a long time after they left. The wine was still running down the wall. Ruth's napkins were still folded perfectly under the forks, untouched, like the dinner they were pressed for never happened. I took out my phone and I photographed the wall. I don't know exactly why. Instinct. Or maybe some part of me, the part that had been keeping records since I was old enough to know I needed to, already understood what was coming. I called Danielle at 9:14 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me," she said. So I did. All of it. The glass, the threat, my dad asking for bread while wine dripped down my wall. When I finished, she was quiet. Then, Maisie, do you still have the will? Yes. And the deed is in your name only. Yes. Okay. I heard her exhale slowly. Then they just made a very serious mistake, and I know exactly who you need to call tomorrow morning. I looked at Ruth's napkins still waiting on the table. Who? I asked. Someone who's going to make Holly's little threat the funniest thing she ever said. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with the deed, the will, and a yellow legal pad, and I wrote down everything I remembered. Every conversation, every text, every time Holly walked through my door like the place already had her name on it. By 3 a.m., I had 4 pages. By morning, I had something else. A plan. That photo of the wall, it mattered more than I knew.
I'm not someone who asks for help easily. Danielle had to say Isabel Ryan's name 3 times before I wrote it down. It was 7 a.m. I'd been awake since the glass hit the wall. My coffee was cold. Ruth's napkins were still on the table because I hadn't been able to touch them, like moving them would mean last night actually happened. She's a property attorney, Danielle said. She's handled contested inheritance cases for 15 years. Maisie, write the name down. I wrote it down. Isabel Ryan answered her own phone. That surprised me. No assistant, no voicemail, just a direct, unhurried voice that said, "Ryan Law, talk to me." I talked. I kept it factual. The will, the deed, Holly's 3 months of pressure, the glass that hit the wall, the threat. I didn't editorialize. I didn't cry. I just laid it out like a timeline. When I finished, Isabel was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Send me the will, the deed, and any texts or voicemails where your sister or parents referenced the property. Today, if you can. That's it? That's the start. A pause. Ms. Marsh, how long have they been accessing the Birchwood house? I thought about it. Holly's been using the back studio for her content shoots, maybe 5 months. Mom and Dad come on weekends sometimes. They have a key I didn't give them. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, Isabel said, and the way she said it, quiet, almost careful, made my stomach tighten. Okay, what? Send me everything, and I'll call you by end of day. She called at 4:47 p.m. The will is airtight. 3 witnesses, notarized, no ambiguity. Your name, only your name. Under Texas law, your sister has no claim, not as family, not as a long-term occupant, nothing. The statute of limitations on contesting it expired 2 years ago. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. However, Isabel's voice stayed even, I need you to understand what we're dealing with. 5 months of undocumented access, a key they shouldn't have, and a sister who just made a verbal threat on property she has no legal right to. This didn't start last night, Maisie. They've been building toward this. I looked at the photo on my phone, the wine streak down the white wall. I know, I said quietly. Good, because I'm going to send them something that makes the position very clear. And when I do, and I want you prepared for this, it's going to get loud before it gets quiet. How loud? Loud enough that you'll want to be out of Austin for a few days. I had a work conference in Chicago the following week. I moved my flight up by 4 days and didn't tell anyone. Isabel sent the package on a Tuesday, certified mail. Inside, a certified copy of the will, the deed with my name underlined, a formal cease and desist regarding access to the Birchwood property, and a notice that the locks had been changed effective that morning. I'd changed the locks myself at 6 a.m. before the sun came up. stood in the cold on Ruth's porch in my coat, hands shaking slightly, and thought about how many mornings she'd stood in that same spot watering her plants. "I've got you, Ruth. I've got it." I was in Chicago when Danielle texted, "Package delivered. Holly's car is in the driveway. Has been for 2 hours." Then 30 minutes later, "She's still there." Then, "Maisie, she's not leaving." My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Ms. Marsh, my name is Benjamin Willis. I represent your sister, Holly Lane. I think there's been a misunderstanding we can resolve quickly and quietly." I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed. Quickly and quietly. The words of someone who thinks you'll fold. "Mr. Willis, there's no misunderstanding. The will is clear, the deed is clear. Your client has been accessing property that isn't hers and has now been formally notified to stop." A small pause. Recalibrating. "Ms. Marsh, your sister has made significant personal investment in that property. She used a room for Instagram shoots. And given the family nature of the situation, we believe a conversation between all parties. Have your client call my attorney. And Mr. Willis, the locks have already been changed. If anyone enters that property without my permission, we won't be having phone conversations anymore." I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear this time. I called Isabel immediately, told her about Willis. She didn't sound surprised. "I expected this. He'll push once, then go quiet when he reads the statute dates. What I need you to think about, and I want you to sleep on this, is what you actually want to do with the house." "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are options. We can hold it, enforce the cease and desist, and let them exhaust themselves, or—" She stopped. "Or what, Isabel?" A beat. "Or we remove the house from the equation entirely, and there's nothing left for them to fight over." I stared at the ceiling of that Chicago hotel room for a long time. Remove the house entirely. I knew what she meant, and I knew somewhere, in the part of me that Ruth had quietly built strong, that it was the right move. But what I didn't know, what kept me awake until 2 a.m., was that Holly already knew it too, and she'd gotten there first.
I found out from a stranger. A real estate agent named Leon Marshall left a voicemail on my phone at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday. Pleasant voice, professional. He introduced himself, mentioned the Birchwood property, and said he wanted to confirm the listing details before the open house that weekend. I played it 3 times. The open house. Holly had listed my grandmother's house for sale. I called Isabel before I was fully dressed. "She listed it," I said. "Holly listed the Birchwood house. There's a real estate agent. There's an open house this weekend." A pause. Then Isabel, very carefully, "Send me the voicemail." I forwarded it and stood by the hotel window watching Chicago traffic move 6 floors below me, thinking about how Holly had stood in my kitchen 4 days ago and thrown a wine glass at my wall, thinking about how my dad asked for more bread, thinking about how fast she'd moved. Isabel called back in 11 minutes. "Okay, here's what happened. She contacted a listing agent and represented herself as the property owner. The listing agent pulled public records, saw the address, didn't dig deep enough into the deed. It happens. It's also fraud, Maisie. What she did is called fraudulent misrepresentation, and in Texas it carries real consequences. Can she actually sell it? No, the deed is in your name. No title company will close without your signature. She cannot legally transfer this property. What she can do is create enough confusion and noise to scare off legitimate buyers if you decide to sell, damage the property's market reputation, or tie you up in enough chaos that you give in just to make it stop. That was the strategy. It had always been the strategy. Not to win legally, just to exhaust me. What do? I'm filing an emergency injunction today to pull the listing and bar her from representing the property in any capacity. I'm also filing a fraud complaint with the Texas Real Estate Commission against the agent for failure to verify ownership. A brief pause. And Maisie, I need you back in Austin, today if possible. I rebooked my flight, packed in 20 minutes, and texted Danielle from the cab to the airport. Holly listed the house. 3 dots. Then, I know, it's on Zillow. Maisie, it's been up since Monday. Monday, 2 days before Leon Marshall's voicemail. She'd listed it the day after receiving Isabel's cease and desist. I put my phone face down on the seat and looked out the cab window at the Chicago skyline disappearing behind me and thought about the version of me that almost didn't call Isabel, that almost answered Benjamin Willis politely and agreed to a family meeting and let things get handled the way they'd always been handled, quietly, in Holly's favor while I swallowed it. That version of me would have lost everything by now.
The flight was 2 hours. I spent the first hour going through my phone. Old texts from Mom about the Birchwood house, Dad's voicemails about just being flexible, Maisie. A string of messages from Holly that started friendly and got harder every week until they stopped entirely 3 months ago, when I stopped responding. The second hour, I just looked out the window. I kept thinking about Ruth. Not the house, not the deed. Ruth. The way she'd sit at her kitchen table on Saturday mornings with her reading glasses pushed up on her head, not reading, just thinking. The way she'd squeeze my hand when I visited and say, "You turned out right, Maisie. I want you to know that." She said it like she knew I needed to hear it, like she knew what I was going back to every time I left her house. She left me that house because she knew they'd come for it. She left it to me anyway. Isabel met me at her office at 6 p.m. Danielle came too, sat in the corner chair with her coat still on, hands wrapped around a coffee cup. Isabel laid it out on the table. The injunction, already filed, the fraud complaint, submitted, a cease and desist specifically naming Holly, Mom, and Dad because Isabel had found something else while I was on the plane. "Your parents gave Holly permission to list the property," Isabel said. She slid a printed email across the desk. "This was sent to the listing agent from your father's email address 3 days ago. He described himself and your mother as co-owners and said Holly was acting with full family authority." I stared at the email. Dad's address, Dad's name in the signature. He knew. It wasn't a question. They all knew, Isabel folded her hands. This wasn't Holly acting alone. This was coordinated. The room was very quiet. Danielle set down her coffee cup. I looked at that email for a long time. My dad's name at the bottom, professional, formal. The same man who couldn't make eye contact with me across a dinner table 4 days ago had found enough energy to co-sign his daughter's fraud. "Okay," I said finally. Isabel looked at me carefully. "Okay? What's our next move?" Isabel almost smiled. "Okay. The hearing is Friday. Judge Patricia Morris. She doesn't like fraud and she doesn't like wasted court time. I want you composed, documented, and ready to answer one question." "What question?" "What do you want to do with the house?" She held my gaze. "Because after Friday, Maisie, it's going to be fully, legally, unambiguously yours. No contest, no gray area. And you need to know your answer before Holly's lawyer tries to make you feel guilty for having one." I thought about Ruth at her Saturday morning table, her reading glasses, her hand on mine. "You turned out right, Maisie. I want you to know that." "I already know my answer," I said. Isabel waited. "Sell it to a family that actually wants it, and make sure the paperwork is done before Holly finds out."
Danielle exhaled slowly from her corner chair. Isabel picked up her pen. The hearing was Friday. Holly showed up with Benjamin Willis and a folder of printed emails she thought proved her case. She didn't know Isabel had already spoken to the judge's clerk. She didn't know about the buyers, and she definitely didn't know about the second thing Isabel had found, buried in Dad's email thread, that changed everything.
The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a ceiling fan turning without doing anything useful. I sat beside Isabel in a gray blazer I had ironed at 5 a.m. because I needed something to do with my hands, and I stared straight ahead while Holly and Benjamin Willis settled in across the aisle. Holly was dressed like she was closing a deal. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Judge Patricia Morris walked in at 9 a.m. exactly, opened the file, read without looking up, then looked up. "Miss Ryan, walk me through it." Isabel was precise. The deed, the will, the unauthorized listing, Leon Marshall's voicemail played in full, Holly's open house announcement echoing off the wood paneling like something absurd. Benjamin Willis stood when Isabel sat. Good suit, practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges the listing was premature." Judge Morris looked at him over her glasses. Premature? A miscommunication within the family regarding shared interest. "Mr. Willis," her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "The deed has one name on it. Is that name your client?" "No, Your Honor." "Then what are we discussing?" Willis regrouped. Emotional investment, family history, potential for mediation. Judge Morris made a note, looked at Isabel. "You mentioned a second matter." Isabel opened a folder, slid copies to the judge and Willis simultaneously. Unhurried, the move of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. During discovery, we obtained the full email thread between the defendant, her listing agent, and the plaintiff's parents. A pause. The initial email from the plaintiff's father presented himself as co-owner and authorized Holly to list the property. What that disclosure didn't include was the follow-up email sent the next morning. Willis was already reading. I watched his face change. Mr. Morris wrote, Isabel's voice stayed even, "Make sure this is done before Maisie finds out. Once it's listed and there's an offer on the table, she won't have the stomach to fight it in public." The room went quiet. Holly's pen stopped moving. I had known since Isabel's office. I had known since the dinner table, since Dad asked for bread while wine dried on my wall. I had known since I was 15 and my laptop money disappeared into Holly's MacBook and nobody said a word. But hearing it read aloud in a courtroom, "Make sure it's done before Maisie finds out," that was my dad, not Holly acting impulsively. A plan. My parents had sat at my table, eaten my food off Ruth's napkins, already knowing what they were doing the next morning. Emotion, grief, landing, she gives it one breath and puts it away. I looked at my hands flat on the table. One breath, put it away. Judge Morris had gone very still, in the way judges go still when they've already decided. She looked at Willis. "Does your client wish to respond?" Willis leaned to Holly. They whispered. Holly's jaw tightened. One small shake of her head. "No response, Your Honor." The judge wrote something. Then, "Injunction granted. The listing is to be removed within 24 hours. Miss Lane is barred from representing, listing, accessing, or encumbering the Birchwood property in any capacity." She looked up.
I'm also referring Mr. Morris's email to the Travis County DA's office. That language suggests premeditated intent to defraud. She closed the folder. We're done. Gavel. Done. Danielle's hand touched my back from the row behind me, brief, steady. Holly's heels were already sharp and fast toward the door. At the doorway, she stopped, turned, and looked at me for the first time all morning. Her face wasn't angry. It was something that in a different family, built differently, might have looked like regret. Then she walked out. Outside on the courthouse steps, Isabel turned to me. The buyers are ready. Charlie Wells has a young couple, 2 kids. They've seen the property twice. They want it. Do the kids like the garden? I asked. Isabel almost smiled. The daughter spent the entire second showing talking to the roses. I laughed. First time in a week. Sign this week. Close in 30 days, Isabel said. I thought about Ruth's porch, her Saturday mornings, her hand on mine. You turned out right, Maisie. Let's get it done. I signed 4 days later. The Garner family closed in 28 days. Holly found out the day the sale recorded, publicly. What happened after that, what it cost all 3 of them, I didn't engineer. I didn't need to. Some consequences don't need your help arriving.
I didn't watch it happen. That was intentional. I'd spent 34 years in the front row of everything Holly broke and everything my parents excused, and I was done with that seat. By the time the Garner family moved into Birchwood, I was in Nashville, 3 states away, setting up a new apartment with second-hand furniture and Ruth's embroidered napkins folded in my kitchen drawer. Danielle sent updates. I read them once and put my phone down. Holly's unraveling was fast. Without the Birchwood listing, which she'd apparently been using to secure a business loan against the projected sale, her wellness brand collapsed within 3 weeks. The lender pulled out. Her equipment lease defaulted. The carefully curated grid she'd built for 3 years went private overnight, then silent. Last Danielle heard, Holly was waitressing in a suburb outside Austin, shared apartment, no car. I didn't feel triumphant reading that. I felt tired, the specific tiredness of someone who wanted a sister and got this instead. Mom called twice the week the sale recorded. I let both go to voicemail. The first was panicked. Maisie, we need to talk. This has gone too far. Call me back. The second was quieter, smaller. She said she didn't sleep. She said she missed me. She said she was sorry. I sat with that voicemail for a long time. The word sorry in my mother's voice. Finally, after 34 years of watching her choose Holly in 100 different ways on 100 different days. Sorry arriving now, after the courtroom, after the fraud referral, after everything was already gone. I didn't call back, not because I wanted to punish her, because I finally understood that responding would mean re-entering something I barely survived leaving. Some doors you close not in anger, but in self-preservation. You close them gently, and you don't reopen them. Dad never called. I used to think that would hurt more than anything, but by the time I was unpacking boxes in Nashville, I realized the absence of his call felt less like abandonment and more like honesty, the first honest thing he'd given me in years. I hung Ruth's photo on the wall above my desk the first night, her and Harold in the garden, arms around each other, squinting into the sun. I'd had it framed before I left Austin. Below it, I put the last note she'd written me, the one from the cedar drawer, mounted simply. Natalie, you gave us love when others only took.
She'd written my middle name. I never told anyone that. I stood there in my half-unpacked apartment looking at her handwriting, and I cried for the first time since the wine glass hit the wall. Not for the house, not for the courtroom, for her, for the years I'd spent trying to make my parents see what she always saw without trying. I cried for a while, then I washed my face, made coffee, opened my laptop. The app had been running for 2 months. Danielle and I had built it nights and weekends for the better part of a year, an education platform teaching kids to code through simple, creative projects, the kind of thing Ruth would have sat me down at her old desktop to try. We'd launched quietly, no press, just a product link and word of mouth. By the time I was settled in Nashville, it had 40,000 users. A conference in Memphis invited me to speak. I said yes, stood on a stage in front of 300 people and talked about building something from nothing, about the people who believe in you before you believe in yourself, about what it means to protect the things that were given to you with love. I didn't mention Holly, I didn't mention my parents, I mentioned Ruth. 6 months after the sale, Charlie Wells forwarded me an email from the Garner family. They'd planted new roses alongside Ruth's original ones. Their daughter, 7 years old, apparently fearless, had started a garden journal. They'd put a small wooden sign by the gate, Ruth's Garden. I read that email 3 times, then I printed it and put it next to Ruth's photo on my wall. Danielle called that evening. "You good?" she asked. I looked around my Nashville apartment, second-hand couch, coffee going cold on the counter, Ruth's napkins in the kitchen drawer, the app open on my laptop, notifications still coming in. "Yeah, I think I actually am," I said. She laughed. Dorothy would be smug about this. "Ruth," I said. Her name was Ruth. Ruth would be smug about this. "Yeah," I smiled. She really would. "I'm Maisie Marsh. I'm 34 years old. I lost a family and built a life, and I'm still not sure which one I'm more grateful for. But I know this, the people who see your worth before you do, who press it into your hands like a folded napkin and say, 'Keep this,' they don't leave you. Not really. Not ever."